Good morning friends, welcome to the EduSet live lecture. Dear friends, today we are starting a lecture series on microeconomics. In today's lecture we would be discussing on introduction to the economics. Might be you all aware about the basics of economics, but for the depth knowledge of this particular topic we have with us Professor Kamlesh Kakkar. Professor Kakkar is professor at IMSAR, Institute of Management Studies and Research, Maharishi Dayanand University, Rohtak. She has more than 35 years of teaching experience. With this brief introduction, I would like to welcome our guest, Professor Kakkar. Ma'am, welcome to the EduSet live lecture.
Thank you, Dimple. Dear viewers, today I will tell you about what economics is, what is its nature and scope. What is economics actually? Every day we take decisions regarding what to buy, how much to buy. The government also takes decisions regarding how to impose taxes, or which commodities are to be taxed and where the subsidies are to be given. Government takes decisions, no doubt, and we also take decisions regarding how much to save and how much to invest out of our incomes. So all these topics actually relate to the subject of economics. But still we should know what economics is, because its knowledge will enable you to take decisions as buyers, sellers and policy makers in the optimum manner. Economics has been defined differently by different economists. There are four types of definitions of economics. These definitions are wealth definition, material welfare definition, scarcity definition and modern definition. Wealth definition was given by Professor Adam Smith. He is also known as the father of economics. According to this definition, economics is an inquiry into the nature and causes of wealth of nations. This definition was supported by J.B. Say, Ricardo and Walker also. According to Walker, political economy or economics is the name of the part of the knowledge which treats of wealth. J.B. Say defined economics as the science of wealth which treats of wealth. Ricardo emphasized the distribution of wealth instead of the production of wealth. Actually, Adam Smith told us that in economics we are concerned only with the activities which are done for collecting wealth, and by wealth he meant only physical goods which we can touch, which we can see. He said that wealth can be increased either by increasing the demand or by increasing the supply. How? When demand increases, in order to increase the demand, output is also increased, leading to increase in employment in the economy. Incomes of the people also rise, and with rise in incomes, demand rises further, prices rise, profits increase, more investments, output, employment, income, and actually the economy moves on the path of growth. And when we increase the supply first, then again to increase the output, we will increase the employment opportunities will rise in the economy, again leading to rise in incomes of the people, leading to rise in demand, output, employment, and the same phenomena continues and the economy moves on the path of development. So, but this definition was not full of merits only, because it gave more importance to the wealth, and this was mainly giving secondary role to human beings. This was wrong on part of Adam Smith, because wealth is needed for human beings, not human beings are needed for wealth. And this definition narrowed down the scope of economics because it took into account only physical things which we can touch, which we can see. Services were ignored in it. We know services are very important for every economy: healthcare, transportation, banking, education. These are very, very important activities and they are providing employment to so many people. They are satisfying the wants of the people. So, this should not have been ignored. So, that is why wealth definition was criticized by various economists, and then we move on to the material welfare definition given by Marshall. Marshall said that human beings are more important. According to him, political economy or economics is the study of mankind in the ordinary business of life. It examines that part of individual and social action which is most closely connected with the attainment and with the use of material requisites of well-being. So, this definition tells us what Marshall said, and actually what he said, that economics is the study of man which occupies the prominent place in economic study. He talked of the ordinary business of life, which meant that we are mainly involved in the activities of earning money and spending money. He talks of the social life. So, he says that we have to take into account the actions of those people who are living in society. Then he talked of welfare, that only activities which lead to the material welfare of human beings, they are to be counted, other activities are not taken into consideration. Marshall also took wealth as only physical goods which we can see, which we can touch. This definition was supported by Pigou and Cannon. According to Pigou, the range of our inquiry becomes restricted to that part of social welfare which can be brought directly or indirectly into relationship with the miring rod of money. In the words of Cannon, the aim of political economy is the explanation of general causes on which the material welfare of human beings depends. But this definition was also not free from criticism. It was criticized mainly by Robbins. He says that economics is not only concerned with material things, so it narrowed down the scope of economics. Then we are concerned with the activities of service sector, which I told you earlier also, that activities like that of professional singers, actors, donors, they are also required and their prices are also determined, and that has been ignored in Marshall's definition. Marshall talked of welfare, but actually it is very difficult to measure welfare because it is not a fixed and exact thing. And Robbins says that we should take into account all the activities which are demanded in the economy, whether they belong to the material things or whether they are belonging to the service sector. All the activities are not welfare creating. How? You know, in every economy there is production of war equipment, production of drugs, production of liquor. We know that is not creating welfare, that is harmful for the economy, but still they are giving employment to a large number of people, they are providing revenue to the people. So, how can we say that they should be excluded? So, we have to include all the activities whether they belong to the service sector or the production of physical goods. After the Marshall, we have the scarcity definition which is given by Professor Robbins. He gave this definition in his book, An Essay on the Nature and Significance of Economic Science. According to Robbins, economics is the science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. So, this definition implies what are the main features of this definition? Wants are unlimited. Students, you know that wants never come to an end. One want is satisfied, another crops up. In the childhood, you wanted to have a cycle, then you want to have a scooter, then you want to have a car, bigger car, bungalows. So, these wants go on increasing all the time, and that creates a problem that we cannot satisfy all the wants. Then wants differ in intensity. All the wants are not equally important. Some are more important, some are less important. You can say that food, clothing, shelter are the most important wants which are to be satisfied first. Luxury wants can be satisfied later on, or they can be left even unsatisfied. Then means or resources to satisfy these wants are limited. They are scarce. Scarce means that their demand is more than the supply. You see, we have limited land, limited skilled labor, limited technology, and so we cannot satisfy all the wants with these resources. This is also a cause of the problem. There are alternative uses of means. No doubt, resources are scarce, but another problem is that one resource is having a large number of uses. Supposing you have a piece of land and that can be used for cultivation, that can be used for producing, supposing that can be used for dairy farming, or that can be used for factory purpose, that can be used for housing, but again you will have to decide for which purpose the land is to be used. You can take an example of the household. Every day we take some milk, and the milk can be used for various purposes. It can be used for making tea or for drinking, for making curd, cheese and sweets, etc. But you can't use it for all the purposes. If you use it for one purpose, it will not be left for the other purpose. So this creates a problem that for which purpose the resource is to be utilized. So because of these unlimited wants differing in intensity, scarcity of means and alternative uses of means, there is always a problem of choice. But this definition is no doubt better than Marshall's definition and Adam Smith's definition. What it tells us? That economics is a science. It explains the relationship between cause and effect. It is a universal definition. Everywhere, whenever you find there are unlimited wants, limited resources having alternative uses, there will always be a problem of choice, and it takes into account all the activities, whether they belong to the service sector or to the production of physical goods. So it is better, but still it is not flawless. It is having its criticism also. It was criticized by various economists, and what are those points of criticism? Actually, this definition says that economics has nothing to do with the welfare, but actually welfare is very important, and economists are concerned with the welfare of the society also. And even in Robbins' definition, when we say that most important wants are satisfied first, that implies that welfare will be maximized. So welfare is actually hidden in Robbins' definition. Robbins' definition talks of only scarcity, but scarcity is not the only cause of problems. There are certain problems which arise due to plenty. Unemployment is there in the economy because of the overpopulation. If there is overproduction, that will lead the economy to recession or depression. How? If there is overproduction, to sell that, producers will reduce the prices, leading to fall in profits. Next time they will produce less, leading to fall in employment, incomes, and the result will be poverty. So problems can arise even due to plenty also. Then sometimes it is very difficult to distinguish between ends and means. Today you are studying for your degree of BBA or MBA or any other degree. That is an end for you. But once you achieve this degree, then it becomes a source of your livelihood. So where to keep that? it should be kept in the category of means or it should be kept in the category of wants. That is the problem. Robbins' definition has ignored growth and development. It is mainly concerned with macroeconomics while micro is equally important. So, after the Robbins definition, naturally we have the modern definition of economics, which is taking into account growth and development of the economy also. According to Paul Samuelson, economics is the study of how men and society choose, with or without the use of money, to employ scarce productive resources which would have alternative uses, to produce various commodities over time and distribute them for consumption now and in future amongst various people and groups of society. So, modern definition has included the features of all the earlier definitions and it is concerned with the growth of the economy, and we have to say for future also, we have to see that future generations are also not starved of the resources. So, actually economics is what the economists do. So, all the things are included in economics, whether we are talking of fiscal policy, whether we are talking of monetary policy, whether we are talking of exchange rate, it is very wide. So, this was about the definition of economics, and now we will move on to what is the nature of economics. In nature of economics, whether it is a science or it is an art. Economics is a science because it is a systematized body of knowledge. Inductive and deductive methodology is used to study economic problems. Forecasting is also done by economists, and we have different laws explaining the relationship between two variables, like law of demand explains the inverse relationship between price of a commodity and its demand. Laws of production explains the relationship between input and output. So, actually economics is a science, but some economists say that it is not like the physical science in which laws are completely exact. True, economics is actually a social science because it deals with human beings which are full of emotions. Their nature is complex. So, that is why their laws are not exact as that of the science, but still tendencies can be described and even predictions are made in economics. So, economics is a science. Then whether economics is an art or not, art is actually an application of science to solve the different problems. So, economics tells us about the practical solutions to various economic problems. In economics, we see what are the causes of poverty, unemployment and inflation, and it tells us the ways to remove these problems also. So, the economics is both a science and art. Then we have to see whether economics is a positive science or normative science. Actually, positive science is that which is concerned with what is going in the economy. Supposing there is inflation in the economy, and what are the causes of inflation, what are the causes of unemployment, etc. So, economics is a positive science, but in normative science we see what is good, what is bad, and actually what should be done in the economy. So, economics is a normative science also because it tells us that there is inflation and it is bad, it is adversely affecting various sections of the economy. So, it must be controlled. So, it tells us what should be done. So, what we can say that economics is both a positive science as well as normative science because it is telling us about what is happening in the economy and what should be done. That part is also being covered in economics. So, what we conclude, economics is both a science, positive science, normative science as well as an art. Now, after doing about the nature of economics, we will see what is the scope of economics, what we are going to study in it. The scope of economics includes actually what is the subject matter of economics. This is divided into two branches, microeconomics and macroeconomics. Microeconomics is derived from the Greek word micros, meaning small. In the Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith studied the determination of prices of goods and services and inquired into the strengths and weaknesses of market mechanism. Microeconomics tells us how the prices of goods and services are determined. It tells us why the prices of certain goods are higher or less than the others. Actually, it deals with the allocation of resources and which depends upon the prices of goods and prices of factors of production. So, that is why we study about the price determination in this microeconomics, and this price determination depends upon the demand and supply. So, microeconomics is concerned with the demand and supply analysis, in which we will see what are the determinants of demand, what affects the demand and what is elasticity of demand, etc., and what are the, we can say, how the supply is playing an important role in the determination of price. So, and this microeconomics is not only concerned with the allocation of resources, but it also has to see whether there is productive efficiency or not. And actually this allocative efficiency is divided into three parts: productive efficiency, efficiency in distribution and allocative efficiency. So, production efficiency means that production of a commodity cannot be increased without the reduction in some other commodity. Then there is efficiency in production. And when we say efficiency in production, consumption, then it means that we cannot make a person better off without making someone worse off. That is the efficiency in distribution. And allocative efficiency implies that in economy we are producing the goods which are desired by most of the people, or unwanted wants are not being produced in this. So, microeconomics takes the resources as given and talks about the allocation of resources in a proper way. So, naturally it is very important for consumers, producers and policy makers. They can take optimal decisions regarding what to buy. On the part of consumers, they have to take decision what to buy, and producers have to decide what to produce, and government has to decide about the policies regarding the allocation of resources. So, this is very, very helpful for producers, consumers and policy makers. They can take the optimal decisions wherever, in every context. So, this was about what is microeconomics. Now, we move on to the other branch of economics. Microeconomic theory, if you want to know what we are going to study, you can see in the slide. It deals with product pricing, which further depends upon theory of demand, theory of production and cost. Theory of international trade is also a part of microeconomic theory, theory of economic efficiency, theory of distribution. And in factor pricing, we will be dealing with wages, rent, interest and profit. How the wages are determined, which are going to the labor, and how rent is determined, interest and profits. Now, the second is is macroeconomics. Macroeconomics is derived from Greek word macros, meaning large. It is concerned with the economic activities of the economy as a whole, and It deals with aggregate savings, aggregate consumption, aggregate investment, national income, level of employment and output, etc. It explains the relationship between total output, total employment, general price level, rate of economic growth, savings and investment, etc. Microeconomics was telling us about the economic activities of individual units, thousands of consumers, producers, firms, how do they behave. But in macroeconomics, we are dealing with the economy as a whole. We will talk of national income, national output, general price level, total trade, all these are here. So anyhow, both micro and macroeconomics are dependent upon each other. Macroeconomic aggregates are derived from the theories of individual behavior, aggregate consumption functions and aggregate investment functions depend upon individual consumption and individual investment behavior. And when in microeconomics, a producer has to take a decision regarding what should be the price of the commodity, he has to see what is happening in the whole economy, whether there is boom, whether there is recession. So we see both micro and macro are complementary to each other and both are essential to study economics. Thank you. Now we are going to discuss about what are the central problems of an economy. we know that wants are unlimited. They never come to an end, they go on increasing. You may say that you can satisfy your wants of supposing pens, pencils, fruits, vegetables, but still there are many more demands which need to be fulfilled, but they are endless and it is very difficult to fulfill all the wants. Scarcity of resources is there. You know that resources are not unlimited. Land, skilled labor, technology, entrepreneurship, their demand is more than the supply. Were they in unlimited quantities, there would never have been any problem. If we have as much land as we like, or as much skilled labor is there, or entrepreneurship is available, then naturally there would not have been any problem. But the problem is that these resources are scarce. Then due to these scarcity, naturally you can think that you cannot satisfy all of your wants. These resources have alternative uses. A piece of land can be used for cultivation, for housing, for park, for roads, etc. A student can be trained to become a teacher, or to become a doctor, or to become a lawyer. So we have to decide for which purpose the resource, for which purpose or what is the aim of the student, or where he can be trained. He cannot become all. He will have to choose between what he wants to be. So because of this, there is a problem of choice. If there had been only one use of the one resource, then naturally we would never be having any problem. But actually because of the different uses of the resources, there are problems. Supposing you have a 10 rupee note with you, you are feeling hungry and you can get food with that 10 rupees, but your friend's birthday also is there, you can buy a card with rupees 10 for him, or you want to buy a book also which also costs rupees 10. So this rupees 10 can be used for three various purposes. You will have to take a decision for which purpose the rupees 10 note is to be used. So what we see, that because of the unlimited wants, because of the limited resources and having alternative uses, there are problems in every economy. These problems are faced by individuals, by societies, by the whole country. So that is why we will study what are these problems which are faced by all the economies, whether they are industrial economies, whether they are underdeveloping economies, or whether they are isolated economies. What are these problems? These problems are mainly three problems: what to produce and how much, how to produce and for whom to produce. What to produce? This is a very big problem. I told you that our wants are unlimited. We want to have so many goods and services, but resources are scarce. So every economy will have to decide which commodities are to be produced and which can be left unsatisfied or can be left unproduced. Society has to make a choice between, supposing, two types of goods: consumer goods and capital goods. Consumer goods are those goods which directly satisfy our wants, and producer goods are those goods which are used for the production of other commodities. So supposing these two type of commodities are to be produced. So if you produce more of consumer goods, then less will be left for the production of capital goods. You will have to make a choice that which commodities are to be produced, and this problem can be shown with the help of production possibility curve. So what is production possibility curve or production possibility frontier? Production possibility frontier is a curve depicting all maximum output possibilities for two or more goods given a set of inputs. The PPF assumes that all inputs are used efficiently. This tells us various combinations of two commodities which can be produced with the given resources, and actually this represents the menu of goods and services available to this society. You can see in this slide, we have shown the alternative production possibilities of an economy. There are 6-7 combinations A, B, C, D, F, E, F and G. Supposing we are taking two goods, butter and guns. Butter is in millions of pounds and guns are in thousands. In one combination, first combination is that either if all the resources are put to the production of guns, then you can produce 21,000 guns but no butter. And in combination G, you see that all the resources are put for the production of only butter and no guns are produced. These are the extreme points which are shown as A and as G in the production possibility frontier. And within these two limits, there are various combinations B, C, D, E and F, in which we see that as we are increasing the production of butter, the production of guns is going to be reduced. And what you see, that every time when you are increasing the butter, you have to sacrifice more and more of guns. So this shows that if you want to produce more of one thing, you will have to reduce the production of the other commodity. So that is why these questions become very important, whether you produce for the defense sector or you are producing for the consumers, because if you are producing more for one type of the people, other people will have to be starved off. If we are producing more guns, then the consumers will not be satisfied, they will not get their goods and services according to the requirement. And actually when you are showing the combinations A, B, C, D, E, F, if you join all these points, you will be getting the production possibility frontier. Now all the points on this production possibility frontier from A to F shows that economy is working efficiently, it is producing what it can produce. If the production is at point U, which is inside the production possibility curve, that implies that we are not fully utilizing the resources, they are underutilized, they are lying waste. So this means production can be increased, and the point K, which is outside the production possibility frontier, that show that is not within the reach of the economy, because we do not have the resources to make production up to this point. So this tells you about how much production is being there. So this was the first problem, no doubt, but we have to decide how much also. This was regarding the decision of what to produce, at how much, this will depend upon the population of the economy. If there is high population, large population, naturally more output will be produced of the goods, and if the population is of small size, then naturally demand would be less and quantities of output will be produced less. Then the second problem is how to produce. Once the question of what to produce is being solved, you have taken decisions what to produce. Then the second problem is how to produce that, because there are various methods of producing a commodity. You can see that you can employ more labor or you can employ more capital in producing a commodity. So the society must determine who will produce the goods, with which resources and by employing which technique of production. This choice of technique will depend upon the availability and prices of factors of production. Why? These two techniques can be named as labor intensive technique and capital intensive technique. When you employ more labor as compared to the capital in the production of a commodity, that is known as labor intensive technique. And where the production requires more of capital as compared to labor, then we call it capital intensive technique. In the production of two commodities, we can tell whether it is labor intensive or capital intensive. Supposing you take the case of wheat and steel, these are two commodities. We can see what is the labor capital ratio in wheat and what is the labor capital ratio in steel. You will find that labor upon capital ratio is more in wheat, implying that wheat is a labor intensive commodity and steel labor capital ratio is less as compared to what it is in wheat. So that implies that steel is capital intensive. And every work, even at home, you can see that you can wash your clothes with your own hands or you can make use of the machines. So you can employ labor, you can employ maid servant for washing the clothes, and you can also have a washing machine for washing the clothes. So you will have to decide how you will satisfy your want, whether you will be wanting capital technique or you will be wanting labor technique. It will depend upon the prices of factors of production. You can see in USA, you must have heard that their labor is very, very costly. So that is why they are using capital intensive techniques. Everything is done by machines because labor is more costly. And so far as India is concerned, we are having cheap labor. That is why in every household we find that people have employed maid servants, etc. for getting things done, because that is cheaper as compared to the use of machines. So in production, this was in the sector of consumption. In production, again you will see you have to take the decision, you have to make a choice which technique is to be used. Then the third problem, main problem, is for whom to produce. You know, all the household, all the individuals are there and they are demanding different goods and services. So we have to see who will ultimately consume the goods, whether production will be more for the poor and less for the rich, or more for the rich and less for the poor. Is there a fair and equitable distribution of wealth and income? How is national income divided among different households? Whether government is providing minimal food, minimal needs to the people, or people are required to work for their livelihood. This question is solved in for whom to produce, and naturally it will be depending upon what are the incomes of the people. If there is equitable distribution of income, then this means the gap between the rich and the poor is less and all people are demanding the goods of necessities, goods of comfort. Those goods will be produced more in the economy. But if there is inequitable distribution of income, we see that rich are very rich and a very large part of the national income is going to a few rich. So they can afford to pay more and they are demanding more of the luxury goods. Then luxury goods are produced more in that type of the economy where there is inequitable distribution of income. So we see these are the main three problems which are faced by every economy, and now we will see how these are being solved in different economic systems. So economic systems or economies. So first type of economic system is capitalistic economy. What is this capitalistic economy? This is also known as the market economy. It had its origin in the famous work of Adam Smith when he wrote his book Wealth of Nations in 1776. Then economic system of capitalism was later on known by other names also: private enterprise, free enterprise and market economy. Actually, what happens in this economy? In this economy, all the factors of production are owned by the private individuals. There is freedom of occupation. People decide what work they want to do, and every action is motivated by profits. Buyers want to buy at the lowest price, seller wants to sell at the highest price. There is competition among the sellers and buyers, and in this economy the role of government is quite less. So, the decisions regarding all the problems, what to produce, how much to produce, how to produce, are taken by the market, by the private enterprises in this system with the means of price mechanism. Actually, price mechanism is what? In which prices determine all the activities. Here you can say a system of prices, of markets, of profits and losses, of incentives, rewards, determines what to produce, how to produce and for whom to produce. Prices and profits solve the problem of what to produce. What to produce, in this we will see what are the different commodities which will be produced by the sellers, by the producers. Producer will see that which are the commodities which are demanded more in the economy. The commodities which are demanded more, naturally they can be sold at higher prices. Higher prices means higher profits. Producer wants profits. So, the commodities which are demanded more in the economy will produced in more quantities, and the commodities which are not in demand, naturally they can't charge a high price for that. So, they will not produce much of those quantities because they want to earn more and more profits. So, it is the prices which will determine the question of what to produce. So, whether they will be producing machines, whether they will be producing consumer goods, etc., it will be decided mainly by the price mechanism. And in this, the extreme case of economy where government keeps its hand off the economic decisions, they are not interfering in any productive activity, that is called a laissez-faire economy. So, this was how the problem of what to produce can be solved in the capitalistic economy, and how much, again it will depend upon the size of the demand, and size of demand will depend upon the size of population. If the country is having a very large size of the population, then more output will be produced by the producers, and if the economy is having low population, small size of the population, then less will be produced. So, that question is solved by the price mechanism, and we have to see about by the size of population which determines the demand for the commodity. And now we will see how the problems are solved in the socialistic economy. So, first of all we should know what is the socialist economy. Socialist economy is also known as the command economy. In this economy, factors of production are owned by the government. They are collectively owned. They are not owned by the private individuals. Here it is the government which owns and directs the operations of enterprises in most industries. There is no freedom of choice of occupation. Everything, every action is decided by the government. Government makes planning also, and it solves all the problems through the ownership of resources and its power to enforce decisions. Such economies are also known as centralized economies, centrally planned economies, non-market economies. Now, here all the problems, how they will be decided. In socialist economy, because it is the government which owns all the resources and there is no freedom of occupation, freedom of choice, so the government will decide what to produce and how much to produce on the basis of the size of population and needs of society. Naturally, what to produce? The government is here concerned about the welfare of the society. Government sections are not motivated by the profit. So, government will see to it which commodities are to be produced, which will create the welfare of the economy as a whole. They have to produce goods not only for the rich but for the society as a whole, for the poor people also. So, that is why production will be done according to the requirements of the society. Goods of necessities, goods of comforts will be produced more, and as the economy grows and as the government has more resources, then only government will move on to the production of luxury goods etc., or goods which are branded goods etc., which can be afforded by the people having larger incomes. But firstly, only goods of comfort like food, clothing, shelter, education, healthcare, these will be provided first by the government because they are for the welfare of the society. And how much? Again, this question we have already discussed that this depends upon the size of the population. Larger the size of population, larger will be the production. Lower the size of population, lower will be the production. So, how much will be decided by the government on the basis of the population of the economy. Now, the second question regarding the choice of technique of production or how to produce, whether to use labor intensive technique or to produce capital intensive technique, will be again decided by the government. In capitalistic economy, this was decided on the basis of prices. In capitalist economy, we saw that the private individuals look at what are the prices of factors, and accordingly they decided the choice of technique of production because they wanted to minimize the cost and maximize the profits. But here the government has to see if there is more labor in the economy. No doubt it may be costly, but the problem is that we have to provide employment to all the people because unemployment is a very big problem. All the persons who are willing to work must get jobs. So, the government will adopt labor intensive techniques if there is a more labor force in the economy. Just like we can see in case of India, we have too much labor force in our economy, we have young workforce. So, the government is promoting or the government is advocating the use of labor intensive techniques so we can provide employment to more and more people. Capital intensive technique will be used only where it is minimizing the cost or it is useful for the country, for the development of the economy. So, again welfare will be kept before taking decision regarding which technique is to be used, capital intensive or labor intensive, depending upon the requirements of the nation. And then regarding what to produce, after that we come to know what is the for whom to produce, who are the persons who are going to get the benefits of this society. In capitalistic economy, goods were produced according to the requirements of the people and rich people could pay to afford more. So, that is why luxury goods may have been produced more in case of the capitalistic economy. But in socialistic economy, production is for the requirement of the people and government sees to it that those commodities are produced which are needed by the poor people. They can afford to buy those goods and they are not starved of the minimum needs. Government looks to it because welfare is concerned, and government wants to have equitable distribution of income. For this purpose, they impose high rate of taxes on the rich people and low rate of taxes on the poor people, and more expenditure is done for the welfare of the poor people. So, the question regarding for whom to produce is also solved by the government in this economy, while all these decisions were taken by the private individuals on the basis of profit motive under the capitalist economy. Now we move on to the mixed economy. Just now we have talked of the capitalistic economy and socialistic economy. Actually, these are the two extremes. At present day, no economy is completely socialistic or completely free economy, rather there is a mixture of the two, that is known as mixed economy. So, there is mixture of either markets and economic planning, public ownership and private ownership, or free markets and economic interventionism. We see that there is coexistence of public sector as well as private sector. In the mixed economy, both sectors are there. Some commodities are produced in the public sector, some are in the private sector, and accordingly the decisions will be taken. In the private sector, it is the in private sector again profit is the more motive, and private individuals, private entrepreneurs will take the decisions regarding what to produce, how much to produce, and how to produce and for whom to produce. In this sector again they will see that those commodities are produced which are in high demand, which they can sell at very high rates, and where they can get the maximum of profits. And in how much quantity, if you think that by producing less they can increase their profits, they will produce less of those commodities. And regarding the choice of techniques, again they will see which technique is giving the minimum cost or maximization of profit. Accordingly, labor intensive or capital intensive techniques will be used. When labor is cheap, they will not make use of the capital intensive techniques, and when labor becomes costlier, they will make use of the capital intensive techniques. So, it will depend upon them, looking at the situation, whether labor is cheap or capital is cheap, which technique is to be used. And again, for whom to produce? They will produce for the rich people, because rich people can afford to pay more. So, that is why you see branded goods are produced and they are sold at very high rates, and they are being purchased by the rich section of the society. In private sector, all this is happening. You see in the private sector, when even education is in the private sector, you are giving lots of fees, a large amount of fees is charged in the private sector, but when you study in the government sector, you see a very low amount of fees is being charged. So, this tells you what is the difference between the decisions taken by the private sector and the public sector. And all the activities which are in the public sector, decisions are taken again by the government, taking into consideration the welfare of the society as a whole. So, the commodities which are demanded by the poor people, they are produced in the sector of owned by the government, and they are charged low prices, and government also imposes, we can say, low rate of taxes on the poor people so as to provide welfare. So, this way we can also see what are the important implications of production possibility frontier. We can see one example for supposing if there is a poor nation. In poor nation, production possibility curve in the figure A, we are at A where small amount of the necessities is produced and a large amount of the necessities is produced, because the economy can't afford to produce more of the luxury goods. But when there is growth in the economy due to the discovery of new resources or due to improvement in technology, the economy's PPF shifts to the right, and we reach at the point B where we see that the production of food has increased, but mainly the production of luxuries has also increased. This shows that as the economy grows, economy can provide more of the luxury goods also. So this was about one application of production possibility frontier.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for this productive session, and thank you viewers for watching our program. Till then, goodbye.